You're listening to episode 251 of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast, where we're going to talk about why it's important to sometimes let your business be boring. Welcome to the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast, where being a badass has less to do with what you wear and what music you listen to, and everything to do with whether you've got the thriving online business of your dreams. I'm your renegade thinking Harvard Law grad turned online entrepreneur host, Bobby Klink. In my years building my thriving business, the most important lesson I've learned is that being a badass online marketer isn't about secret strategies or ninja tactics. It's about doing the basic stuff right and showing the F up. So each week here on the show, you'll get clear, easy to execute guidance on how to build your online business and a swift kick in the ass or two to make sure you're getting it done. Hey there, I am your host, Bobby Klink, and I am excited for today's show where I'm going to give you some tough love. And this is something that has occurred to me that we need to talk about. And you know, it's the idea of needing to let your business be boring. And it's a concept that I've thought about a lot and I've heard put different ways, and I hear problems with it come up in multiple contexts, right? So I think a lot of it comes and stems from messages that things that I say and that other people say about how you should love your business and how your business should be fun. And I talk about how getting up and working in my business seems like going and playing with friends each day and things like that. And I think that message, that message permeates and ends up leading people to think that every moment in every day, we should be having a great time in our business. And so then if we feel bored, if we feel like a moment of in our business, somehow we think that's a sign that we're not in flow, that we're not doing something right, etc. And I'm here to say that's not the case. There is a distinction between enjoying what you do, liking your business, and always having fun. And they're not the same thing. And what I would say is that look, your business is going to be work. It's not going to be easy, but it should still generally be enjoyable. Like if every day you're getting up and it feels like business sucks, that's a problem. But if you're building a business from the perspective of, you know what, I need a way to get my kicks in life, so I want to build my business to give me those kicks in life, that is a problem. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about the need to let your business be boring sometimes and to accept that business will be boring sometimes, and that's okay. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, before we dive in, this episode is brought to you by Badass Online Marketing University, my totally free training program to help you build the business that you want and to build a business that will succeed and will stick around for the long term. If you haven't gotten into BOMU yet, it is totally free. It is our answer to helping online business owners learn what they need to learn without death by 1,000 courses. In other words, instead of having to go and buy a bunch of $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 courses just to learn the basics of online business, we give it all away for free. And you can sign up at bobbyklink.com/BOMU. That's BOMU. Now, with that, I want to dive into this episode. And the way I'm breaking this episode down is to talk, I'm going to kind of talk about different types of problems and personality things. And by the way, to be clear, this is not a case where I am talking about other people. Now, not like some of these things don't apply to me, but some of them do. And I'll tell you the personality things that are problematic for me. So we're going to talk about different kind of perspectives and different problems and types of problems that people create when they're not willing to let their business be boring. But before we do that, I do want to talk about, I'll never forget there was a moment I was at a mastermind retreat and this issue came up and you know, someone was thinking about pivoting their business completely because they were in a state where they were bored for a little bit or they were saying, is it a problem? And someone said, look, and the issue came up. Your business is not here to entertain you all the time. And I thought that was a critical insight because we hear that all the time. Now, again, I do believe you should love what you do. I do believe that you should be having fun more than you're not having fun in your business. But the important caveat here is that your business should not be the source of all fun in your business, and I think, or in your life, and I think that's the problem. So with that context, I want to talk about different types of places where this comes up. And so the first place this comes up, and where I hear this constantly, is where people say, well, I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur. And so I want to build a business around those multiple passions. And what this tends to be, by the way, is someone pushing against the notion of niching and building a business around a specific niche. They're like, well, I want to do this over here, and I'm going to do that over there, and I'm going to do this over there, etc. And so they're saying, like, I like doing a lot of different things, so I want my business to scratch all of those itches. And this is one where I'm going to just tell you flat out, your business is not the only place you should be expressing your passions in life. Like, for example, I have a passion for beer, but I'm not scratching my itch for that passion in my business, which is about serving online entrepreneurs. Like, I'm passionate about both things, but they don't go together. And so I can't have a business that's both of those things. And the problem with trying to put these things together is that let's talk about it first from your perspective. You're splitting your attention within your business between various completely different businesses, really. If you're trying to create, businesses that serve different people with different types of solutions, you're not building one business, you're building multiple businesses. To constitute a single business, you really need to be talking to one general group of people. Now, you could have maybe, slight variations in that, et cetera. But for me, to have a single business, I have to be helping the same group of people. That's why, although I have the legal stuff and the business stuff side of my business, they're both serving online entrepreneurs. And so I'm able to serve the same people, and getting one client is helping, allows me to potentially sell both on both sides of the business, et cetera. So in that sense, I'm building a single business. But if I were building a business helping, for example, online knowledge business owners like I do, and then separately wanted to serve like tech entrepreneurs, guess what? That's two businesses. Because the problems that they have are so different that realistically, I wouldn't be serving the same group of people. But at least in that context, they'd be kind of related, right? They'd both be entrepreneurs. There would be business building and legal stuff on both sides. But I will hear people who, for example, have a business helping people with like a craft of some sort, and it's very successful, but then suddenly want to build a business serving entrepreneurs separately. And I say, whoa, we've got to stop here. Because if you're doing that, think about it. You're going to have to split your attention between both those completely different audiences, completely different problems. And when I say split your attention, you're going to have to split your attention, but internally, you're going to have to build systems that separate it out. Like, you're going to have a list of craft on the craft side and a list on the entrepreneur side. You're going to have, like, theoretically, really, you need to have a website for one and a website for the other. And they probably can't use your name, because if they use your name, guess what? You're going to have problems of people not knowing where to go. So you have all of those issues happening. And so you're splitting your attention. And if you split your attention, what happens is you never focus on building one of those businesses to completion. And when I say completion here, like, you never complete building a business, but you never even get to the point of really getting it kind of so that it's kind of going on its own. If you want to build multiple businesses, the answer is you've got to get one of those businesses to the point that you can extricate yourself and it's kind of running on autopilot. It's you have to get to what is like kind of that last phase of building an online business where you have teams, you have systems, you have all of that stuff, and you can step away, and then you're the owner, and maybe you put a little bit of time in there. But then what you do is that's built, and then you build a different business, and you're putting almost all of your time, attention, etc., in building that second business. But you'll notice you're not multitasking and building two businesses. And so this is a situation where people will say, like, they'll talk about it, and they're like, well, but I want to do this other thing. And it's kind of like they want to entertain themselves. And so I'm simply going to tell you, you can't do it. Now, separate from your attention, the other problem with doing this is like your audience, like the messaging, your audience will be confused. You won't be able to deliver a single coherent message. So, people might find you on one side and be confused, say, wait a minute, and I'll use that crafting an entrepreneur as an example. Wait a minute, I thought you were going to teach me, how to make quilts, but you're talking about how to build a business. I don't understand. I must have been confused. And then they're going to go to someone else. So that's kind of the problem that happens here if you try to do it from your audience perspective as well. So that's the first problem. People who say they're multi-passionate. And again, if you find yourself saying that, I'm all for having multiple passions. But I'm simply going to tell you, and I'm going to give you the tough love right now, that saying that as an excuse to not have to niche and pick one for your business is just that. It's an excuse, and you're not going to succeed. You have to, the solution here is to say, recognize, hey, my business is not the only outlet for my passion. I build my business around one passion, and the other passions I deal with in some other part of my life by having hobbies, by doing those things, but not in my business. So that's the first thing. Now, the second type of situation, the second type of kind of personality where people like get bored and aren't willing to let themselves be bored is what I would call like the constant tinkerers. And I'm kind of guilty of this one. By the way, I'm not really guilty of the multi-passion thing. I have multiple passions, but I've never tried to say I should be able to fit that all in a business. But constant tinkering is something that I struggle with. And what I mean by constant tinkering is that like you have like a solution, for example, and you have like, hey, this is going to be my solution. And then you put it out there, and immediately if it doesn't work, you start messing with stuff. So like, let's say you start a webinar, and then you're like, oh, well, that didn't work, so I'm going to do this other kind of launch. And then you're like, well, that didn't work, and I was doing a course, now I'm going to make it into a membership. And so you're constantly changing things. And this could happen in a lot of ways. It could be literally changing the type of product. It's the same basic solution, but going from course to membership to coaching or whatever, but just like constantly going between the thing. It could be about changing like how you try to sell it. It could be constantly changing where you're putting content out. It could be like changing like messaging all the time, constantly. But the point is that what you're doing here is you're constantly trying to tweak stuff, which you might say, but isn't that what we're supposed to do? We put something out there, and if it doesn't work, we tweak it. Yes, you are. But here's the problem. You have to allow enough time to collect enough data to figure out if something's going to work. And so the point of this is like, if you put something out there and it doesn't sell right away, that might mean that you just haven't given it enough time and gotten enough data. Like I'll hear people who, have had 10 people go through a funnel and nobody bought. And they're like, well, what's wrong with my funnel? And I'm like, I have no idea. There might not be anything wrong with your funnel. It might be that these 10 people just didn't happen to be the 10 people who are likely to buy. And so that's kind of part of it. And again, some of this will come in the context where I talk about the need for having a decent sized email list before you launch any kind of scaled program. 1,000 people, for example, is kind of what I said is the bare minimum before you should even think about creating a scaled program. And the reason why is that on average, 1% of people will buy from your list in a product. And so if you only have 50 people on your list and you go to launch and nobody buys, it could be that your product's wrong, but it might also just be that, well, you didn't have enough people on your list. And so trying to tweak or tinker with anything in your launch or in how your product is a mistake because you just don't have enough information. And so some of this is people trying to tinker before they have enough people generally in their audience. But others is like if you have an evergreen thing, like constantly tinkering and changing and trying to mess with stuff. And I get it. Like, I've watched Facebook ads where I remember early on where I would watch Facebook ads. I'm like, oh, I really want to change it. But the advice was always wait. And it was really hard for me. But like, that's part of it. If you're running Facebook ads, for example, you need to let them run for a while before you do anything to tweak them, to change them, et cetera, because you got to get enough data through, et cetera. Same thing. If you're running any kind of evergreen funnel, you've got to get enough people through the whole funnel before you can look at it. And really, depending on kind of how your funnel is meant to work, it could be that you have to get a ton of people up front because the real money comes at the back end. And you need to get 100 people to that back end to see the offer on the back end before you have any idea whether it works or not. And so, again, you can see how if you're not willing to give it time because you get bored, and again, I say this isn't being bored in a traditional sense, but it is kind of. It's like not being patient enough to let this stuff happen because you want stuff to happen right away, which, again, maybe it's not about being boring. Maybe what I should be talking about in this episode is not letting if you happen to have something like I have attributes of ADD and not letting that stuff rule your day. Same basic concept. You've got to allow it to work itself out. So number one, just to collect enough data to know whether it'll work or not. But the other thing is like to prevent you from changing the wrong thing. So you know what it is you should be changing at a time. And just so I'm clear on this is not only something that happens in the context of selling and funnels. I would actually say it probably rears its head in the worst place, at least for me and in my business, in content. And what I mean by that is content will necessarily be a long-term play. Now, unless you have a huge audience, you're not going to launch a podcast and have overnight have a bunch of people listen to it. You're not going to launch a blog and immediately have a bunch of people reading it. It's the kind of thing that you're going to have to devote time and attention and resources to over a long period of time to have an impact. And so with content especially, you have to be willing, if you launch a new thing, whether it's a new blog, a new podcast, or even a new element of a blog or podcast or YouTube show or whatever, you have to commit to do it, to show up consistently and start gathering information and maybe tinker along the edges, but not kind of throw it and scrap the whole thing because, oh, well, I tried blogging for a couple of weeks and nobody showed up. And you might say, well, nobody does that, but people do. Like I've heard people talk, for example, about how it was in the context of Facebook Lives. Well, I've gone live on Facebook 4 weeks in a row and still I only had one person there. I'm like, yeah, no crap. If you want to build an audience of people to show up regularly with you, it's not a matter of weeks. It's like months, maybe even a year. And people are not willing to be patient. They are not willing to do the boring thing of just showing up over and over again to get the work done. And so that's what you're going to have to do, especially on content. But it's something instead of constantly tinkering and constantly changing up and changing from, one product to another or one, sales mechanism to another, one form of content to another, you're going to have to say, I'm going to show up and I'm going to let it be boring. And I'm going to just do it consistently. So that's kind of this constant tinkering. And then the last category, and this is where I am the worst. This is my biggest problem. This is my biggest challenge. It's the constant new ideas. My brain is one where I constantly have new ideas. And one of my friends in the entrepreneurship space says, I have a tendency, I just want to break stuff. And a lot of us do that. And it's not even that I want to break stuff, but it's like, okay, I got stuff that done. I'm bored with it. I'm moving on. And so it's like, okay, I've got this done. I'm moving to the next thing. And That just doesn't work. So part of this means that, you have to be willing to just kind of let it be boring, have those new ideas, put them down in a particular, an idea journal. And so we are starting to do that. And I'm not great about this, about being willing to let stuff sit, but I have to be. And so what I mean by that is I'm coming up with new analogies, new ways of thinking about business and of marketing on a regular basis. Every day I go for a walk almost, I end up having this new idea. And part of it is if I'm not willing to sit on those for a while, number one, some of them actually won't be good. Some of them, if I write them down and come back to them and think about them a week later, that's not a good point worth doing. But others will kind of continue to come back to me. And so part of the work for me is doing that. It's being willing to put that aside. Don't come up with a new framework. Don't talk about a new framework. Don't talk about a new idea. Instead, stick with the ones you've done and stick with the things that you've come up with, improve it, but don't move on to the next thing. And part of the reason for this is, look, you only have so many resources. So if you're constantly having new ideas and trying to implement those new ideas, and this could be across anything, it could be in messaging, it could be introducing a new product, introducing a new freebie. If you're constantly doing that because you have a new idea for something new and you always want to implement that and try to execute it, what that does is it dilutes your activity. And this is kind of related to and similar to the multi-passionate thing, but it's all within one general line of business, right? But it's the same general problem. I can't focus my attention on one thing. So I start to build something, it starts to get traction, then I move to the next thing. And if you do that, what happens? That first thing that was starting to get traction stops. It loses all momentum because you don't have the attention to put to both. And so you don't promote it. You start promoting something else. You start talking about something else. And then on your audience maybe they were starting to catch up with you of your ideas of what you've been talking about. And then they're there. And then all of a sudden you're talking about something new. And so you kind of lose your audience. You lose them along the way as well. And when you have a team, by the way, this gets even worse because you give your team whiplash. You give your team, they're just coming up, starting to come to grips with one thing, and they're like, hey, we're moving to this other thing. And so so this one, because it's my biggest problem, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, I know this is one of the big struggles. And I want to talk about this, about how to deal with this last one. And so there's a couple of things, and it's kind of related to what I talked about with the multi-passionate. Number one, you need to find an outlet for your ideas, for your thinking that does not involve changing something in your business. Now, depending on who you are, if you're a learner, if you're something like that, it might mean taking courses that are about learning but not executing. Right. So, maybe you want to get a master's degree. Maybe you want to get an MBA, something that you can do on the side while you're building your business. I'm not saying you do that, but I'm just saying that might be something that's useful for you because that takes some of your time and you have to use some of your mental energy over there so you're not messing with the business. It stops you from breaking the business. So that's part of it, is find that outlet, whatever it is for you. Now, again, it might be learning stuff, but it might be something entirely different. It might be just you need a hobby. It might be, that you need to watch more TV. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but maybe you just need something to turn your brain off. I was on a group coaching call this week, and one of the people said, I need to watch more, I think it was cat videos or dog videos on the internet or look at pictures because they're like, you just need to turn your brain off some. And it was kind of a joke, but it's kind of true. I need those things so that my brain can slow down. And I'm not going to tell you how to do that. I'm not the person who's here to tell you how to slow your brain down, but that's what you need, is something to slow your brain down. So that's kind of the first thing. Now, the next thing you need to do in your business, especially if you have a team, but you need to put systems in place to avoid the whiplash and the constant change. And so in my case, what I've done and part of what's happened is, number one, and we're not great about this because I say I'm not great about this, but Katie always says, let's create an idea journal, an idea board on ClickUp, which is our project management system, where you can just go put your ideas. And the point of it is I can just dump the ideas somewhere so that it's there and I can go back to it later. I've talked in the past about having a squirrel journal, like Squirrel from the movie Up, but it's something like that, just having a central place where you can record your ideas and you put them there and they're just kind of a place so that you have them. And what I'll tell you is, by the way, if one of the things you say is, well, I'm going to go learn, and what you're learning is related to your subject matter, that you definitely need one of those because it's going to spur more ideas. But you've got to have somewhere where you can just put stuff so that you don't feel like you have to execute it because you know you're recording it somewhere and you can come back to it. But you also have to have discipline. You have to have the internal discipline and make the decision that I'm not going to try to implement all this stuff. I'm going to complete what we're working on, let it sit, not tinker. Think about the tinkering, make sure I've done enough data collection, et cetera, and got the other stuff that was already there kind of revving up, and then figure out how can I apply these new ideas to make things better. So that's part of it. So kind of an example of how this has happened in my business is this year, up to this point. So last year at our live event, Bomb Live, we introduced or kind of pitched our group coaching program, and we knew it was a high-end product. And so on the business stuff, the only offer I had was free Bomb U and group coaching, which is a higher priced product. And so I knew that I was going to need to introduce something that was more affordable to help people who were not at a point where they wanted to invest in coaching. I knew that. And you can imagine that this year I've had a lot of ideas for what that could look like. But we were disciplined in not trying to rush out a new product because we're like, nope, we're going to spend the year of 2021 working on this. And maybe that's something for 2022. Once we feel good about coaching, once we've really refined coaching, because we went from a coaching program that had like 5 or 6 people in 2020 to 40 people in 2021. So we said, hey, this is a big year for us of changing that. And let's refine that before we tweak anything else or introduce anything else. So like that's an example of it. And we would catalog ideas, et cetera. And the second piece for me, because I have a team, is Katie, my integrator, became the filter. I am to bring ideas to her. We talk it out, not because we're trying to hide it from the team, but to avoid giving Bobby Joe and Shelly on my team whiplash of me talking about this idea, and then it's that idea, and then it's this idea, and then it's that idea. Instead, Katie and I do it. And basically, Katie's kind of a sounding board who listens, let me talk about stuff, finds problem, does that. And then she will, when we decide it's time, we will bring it to the team. And I want to be clear. I have not been perfect about this. This year, again, I took us off on a bit of a side venture where we were potentially going to create some software where we got to the point of signing up for a different options, got some things and investigated no code options, investigated getting someone to build the software for us. We did that and we put in, time and effort into that. That's the kind of thing we probably should have said, no, we're not going to do that. We probably should have said, even at the time, no, it was going to wait. And we've since decided that idea is probably not going to happen. Now, it might at some point way in the future, but right now it's not even on our agenda. But the less of those type of kind of tangents you go off on, the better. Because each one of those tangents is taking me away from the core things in my business. And like my business is a good example of this let it be boring, because the core of my business still remains the legal stuff. But let me be clear, that's not what, excites me and gets me, fired up to talk about. So there can be a general inclination from me to want to kind of go off and do the other stuff. Whereas part of me has to be willing to say, you know what? No, we're going to promote the legal stuff because that's the bread and the butter. That's one of my core differentiators. It's one of those things that makes me different from everybody else. And so that's what I'm doing, and I use that. So If you are like me and have this problem of constant new ideas, you have to set up systems, which is partly about recording ideas, coming back to them and deciding, but also maybe putting in a cooling off period where you're not going to even think about an idea until it's sat there and percolated up multiple times. Find other outlets for ideas where maybe it's not in your business. Find other ways to deal with the stimulation of your brain and ideas. And then if you have team, make sure that you're not putting them through the ringer. So those are kind of the solutions. But at the end of the day, whether it's because you have a tendency to say you're multi-passionate, because you want to tinker with stuff, or because of this constant idea or coming up with new ideas, fundamentally what you have to do is you have to commit to yourself that you're going to do fun stuff, but you're going to let your business be boring. That is what you have to do if you want to build a business that will be successful over the long term. So that's it for today's episode. We'll be back on Thursday where we're going to be talking about one of my favorite concepts, barriers to entry. So I will see you then. That's it for this episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. Make sure to tune in next time. And in the meantime, go out and build the badass business of your dreams.